Welcome back, Marvels. Dana and I.
Hey, everybody. What's up? We're so professional. Yeah.
All right. If you look up professional in the dictionary, there's Dana and I and our Bitmoji in a spaceship.
Don't you love that? I went to this conference I was at. I went to a CE thing. Well, actually, it wasn't a CE thing because it didn't have CEs, which I thought was very telling. They wanted to have the title be autistic AF, and APA wouldn't let them, so they had to change it to autistic, but they had to like put asterisks and other stuff in the word so you didn't and I'm like, how's that different than autistic AF? But it was against that barrier of like that professionalism. I'm like, oh, screw that. We need to talk about reality here. Yeah, it's crazy. So yeah.
Now I have to go back and I have to censor you.
Yeah. Oh, because I said, oh, yeah, there. You're writing down. I was just quoting the title that they couldn't use. So we're laughing because we want to rabble rouse and we want to give you examples of psychologists that aren't uptight and still do cartoons of themselves. Yeah.
I mean, here's the dumb thing. Everyone colloquially knows what AF is.
Yeah.
We all get it. It's funny.
Exactly.
Why can't we be funny? Like, why can't we be fun? It's not, I don't know. I think that's ridiculous. APA
I think it's changing as psychologists get younger. I think that's going to start to change because I see that in my students. So I hope to God, it'll change.
Well, I mean, how many dinosaurs do we know in the field? I mean, all you need to do is look at someone's psych number.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at my psych number and someone else's psych number today. I'm like, oh God.
if it's like 005, run away, don't go. It's gonna be an 80-year-old white dude. Yeah. Oh my God.
Like seriously, I look now and I'm like, they're already at that number? Oh God.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So for those that don't know, when you're looking for a psychologist, if you find their license number, if they're very low numbers, they've been in practice forever and may have dinosaur views. And the bigger the numbers are, they may be younger and they may be thinking more like we do. Yeah.
I mean, Dane, I feel like we're a good balance. I mean, obviously I'm biased.
Yeah.
But that's what this channel is about. Dana, today we were going to talk about, are going to talk about decision making.
Yeah.
And how difficult decision making, like what are the factors of decision making? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I sort of introduced this topic because I saw a really good meme about, it'll say something like the autistic urge to whatever. And this one was, if you're under the gun and you have to make a decision about something, especially if it's something that, when I say has a social impact to it, I mean, like you're not alone or you're not in a vacuum, there are other people around. So making a decision about something and risking the judgment of other people can be really hard. So I think we've talked about this concept in here a lot, about how much can go through my brain, in my autistic brain, in like less than 5 seconds that no one else sees. And a lot of that is weighing, what are other people going to think of this? What's going to happen with it? Am I risking, social backlash? Are people going to judge me? Right. And so what that can do, and I give an example, when we were coming back from the conference, I was super tired. I was super overstimulated. I was just sitting alone in the gate while my wife went off and got a cocktail because she's afraid of flying. It's fine. I'm like, hey, whatever works. Yeah. And so I was like, oh God, I really, am feeling vulnerable. And I remember seeing a stuffed panda in the gift shop that I was at. And I was like, I totally want that panda. So I went and got it. And I really wanted to just hold it on the airplane. And within a period, maybe 20 seconds, I'm like, okay, so if I keep this out and they see this adult person holding on to a panda, do I want to deal with weirdness from other people, or am I going to be sitting there, internalizing that judgment, like people are
Yeah.
judging me, and I feel stupid and all that kind of stuff. And so I
Yeah.
put it back in the bag and I put it in my suitcase, right? So something that's seemingly that benign, I've been holding it on the
Yeah.
couch ever since we got home, but that's something that
Oh.
seemingly benign can really paralyze someone in the moment for decision making. So the other
Yeah.
half of this meme that really struck me was, if that's your process and you've experienced that a lot, and you have experienced real judgment and backlash, there is almost that decision making paralysis that happens. That almost becomes a learned thing, and then you avoid most decision making. So you can see, if you know people or you ask them something, like I'm thinking about pathological demand avoidance. Is this really an internalized learning system of, I don't have enough time to make the decision that's right for me, or I'm
Yeah.
so worried about or stuck in the judgment from others that I become paralyzed, and so I avoid making a decision altogether? That makes
Yeah.
sense to me, that that's what's really going on with that, right?
Yeah, there's so many things there, right? Like that
Mhm.
pathological demand avoidance, that PDA, which is not the same
Mhm.
PDA that
Yeah,
I
not
grew up
the
with, right?
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
I'd like, personally, I'd like them to be both avoided. But
Yeah. There
because
you go.
PDA does make me really uncomfortable. I was on in vacation and people were like in
Depends on
lines
the
in front of
level
us
of
doing
it. Yeah,
stuff, and I
yeah,
was like,
yeah,
put your tongue back in your mouth and like,
yeah,
let's get a move on here. But
yeah.
anyway, sorry, it's a little
That's a
bit
little
graphic.
excessive. I'm like, yeah, yeah.
Sorry. And I think it is excessive personally, but I'm maybe I'm a prude. I don't know. Like, um, but I think that the other piece there, so I think, Dana, what you're saying is, is this decision paralysis an adaption? I've
Mhm.
adapted
Yeah,
to this
yeah,
because of my cumulative experiences, all the iterations of my experiences up to this point. I am a
yeah.
product of that. I think the other place that I see this is in trauma or
Mhm.
complex trauma, where you have gotten punished,
Yeah,
or there have been kind of negative reactions when you have made a decision.
right.
Or maybe there's you've been over controlled,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Or
yeah.
manipulated in some way. When you brought up decision fatigue or
Mhm.
paralysis, I also thought about decision fatigue, which is,
Yeah.
what I
Too
find
many
my
choices, right?
clients,
Yeah,
yeah, and
yeah,
I get
yeah.
this when I'm like planning a vacation or traveling. I love to travel. It's one of my favorite things,
Mm.
but I don't want a lot of choices,
Yeah,
actually. Like
yeah,
too many choices with me not knowing exactly what those things are going to be like. Like if you tell me there are 10 different tours for the Colosseum,
yeah. Oh,
I'm
it's
gonna be
yeah,
like, I don't know.
yeah. And how
I,
do I
I
tell them apart? It's too many. What if I make the wrong decision? Yeah, I get it. Yeah,
right, and so that, and I think that's why travel blogs or vlogs are like they're so popular,
yeah,
because people are like kind of getting that information.
exactly.
Um, but the idea, I think, of making a decision sometimes is not as easy as it sounds
Yeah.
on the surface.
Yeah, especially with all these other factors that could be going on too. If you're like
Yeah,
tired or you're on sensory overload already, those kinds of things, and
yeah,
then being presented with too many decisions, you can have that learned paralysis. I also think that it's one of the reasons we get labeled as rigid, right?
yeah, for sure.
It really is just it's just that it's an adaptive reaction to what we're talking about. It's an adaptive reaction to try to deal with too
Yeah.
much going on, too many things to have to choose from, worrying about what other people are going to think, et cetera, right?
Time blindness,
Yes.
difficulties with executive functioning,
Yeah, that's right.
like, right, that
Yeah.
rigidity that, that you might experience is really, this is how I know how how I have
Yeah.
control or some sense of control over my life
Right. Right.
when I
Exactly.
feel very out of control of it in
Yeah.
general.
Yeah. And so it always comes down
Yeah.
to that self awareness, but also awareness for other people. Um, I think when I realized I was autistic and then had that confirmed and talked to my wife about it, I didn't get judgment back. I got more of a, oh, that everything's falling into place. It totally makes sense. and this falls into place. I'm super lucky. That's not everybody's experience. I have a client of mine that will say something about their neurodivergence and their partner will say, well, that doesn't make sense because it doesn't make sense to him. So it must not be true. And I think that if you're moving through your world all the time with that kind of thing, you could keep your focus narrow and say, I'm just going to do this all the time. Right. I mean, that makes sense. Right.
Yeah.
It could also drive that idea of, you know, when I was a little kid, as long as I had vanilla ice cream somewhere and hot dogs, which I don't eat now, but then, you know, as a kid, if went to a restaurant that didn't have those things, I can remember feeling really anxious as a little kid, like, well, now what am I going to do? Right.
Yeah.
And so that there's so many ways this behavior can sort of come out and getting repercussion from the environment. Like as a little kid, will my parents be irritated with me because I'm fussy because there's nothing on the menu that I'm psyched about? Right.
Yeah.
And again, it's this neurodivergent adaptation, finding a way to do yourself in the world totally makes sense. And then being pathologized for it from the neurotypical world. We see so much of that, right? And I think that's why you and I have spent so much time in here on this podcast talking about those marginalizing frames and the need for, you know, to be this colonized model of there's something wrong with you, rather than, oh, why does this happen? Why do you do this? You know, why does this make sense? Right. So when I was traveling, we were at this hotel. The first night we went to the hotel restaurant, they happened to have a salad that I loved and could eat. And I have dietary issues. And so we went back every night. So my wife, who likes to get different things, could get something different every night. And I got the damn same salad every night, which is perfect. And she's like, let's go there again because there's a safe food for you. It's no problem. But I could see where other people would be like, I don't want to go to the same restaurant. This is stupid. We're traveling. Why can't we go somewhere else? Those kinds of things become paralyzing. And I could see someone saying, I'm not even going to go on the trip because I'm going to have to face these decisions. So you can be aware of how much your life gets constricted by this very idea. Sorry, I cut you off. You say something.
No, it's really funny because Dana, so Dana and I were are parallelly gone.
Yeah. Away, traveling.
From our homes. And the funniest thing, Dana, is that my family found a place that we like to eat. And I had the same salad three out of the 7 days that I was there.
You're kidding. We were separated somewhere in another life.
Yeah.
That's too funny.
And my husband and my daughter found something she loved. And my husband's like, oh, whatever. And it was just very reliable, you know, right. And it was not a big deal, but it was I'm just laughing because it was
funny.
It was a delicious salad, but it was probably the healthiest thing I probably ate on the whole trip. But anyway, you know, in between the half-pound cookies and the, crazy things. But I mean, decision making, you know, the other thing that strikes me, the other image that comes to my mind is, for those of you, I work primarily with teens and young adults in launch and adulting, getting ready to adult, right?
Yeah.
And whenever I'm interviewing a young person, a teen, right, an adolescent, even a young adult, in their 20s, and I ask them a question, and then they look to their parent for the answer.
Oh.
And I get this quite a bit, actually. And, you know, some of the first things that we work on together is just let's just tolerate you having time. And I always say, you have all the time in the world.
Yeah.
There is no rush. I would rather you give me a true one-word answer in 5 minutes than to have that be all supported by someone else. And then this is why anxiety increases, right? Because I don't know how to rely on myself, even in this, in these kind of answering these kind of questions. And it's funny to me because usually the parent is the one that gets very uncomfortable because there's silence. They know the answer. I've asked a question and it's so hard. And so part of it's just you gotta let them answer. Yeah. And it needs to be okay. whatever that
Yeah.
answer is, even if you disagree with it, that's their answer in that
That's right.
moment. And
Yeah.
that's what I find, like, when I start to work with young adults by themselves,
Mm-hmm,
and I
mm-hmm.
start asking them questions like, what are your goals? What do you want? What are you passionate about? They're
Right.
like, I don't know.
Oh, without the parent telling them and saying it
Yeah, or
for
the
them.
system. Like,
Yeah.
there's not
Yep.
so much external,
Yeah.
and that for me then the
Yeah.
launch to adulthood is terrifying then. If,
Absolutely. Yeah.
you
And
know,
even if you're not having a parent do that, you could do that so much in your own mind that
yeah,
you lose yourself. I
yeah.
mean, I remember that being a huge bulk of my own therapy when I was first in therapy was, what do you want? And it
Oh,
was
I
always
know.
this
Yeah, me
process in
too.
my head of, what am I supposed to? What should I? What would I be told? And the schism that results from that in terms of not being really clear about what I want, right? It
Yeah.
happens so easily. And I think we're talking about that, whether it's a parent doing it or you've internalized it, let it versus letting yourself be real and congruent. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and how often do our early experiences become our narrative, become our self
Yeah.
narrative,
That's right. Yeah.
right? Without
Yeah.
even knowing about it. I
Yeah.
often think about this, like kind of the intersection, because I had a similar experience, of doing therapy as an adult on my own, and
Mhm.
having my therapist ask me, well, what is it that you want, Gwen? And I couldn't answer that question. What is it that you
Mm.
need? I couldn't answer that question. I mean, I could answer
Wow.
what I wanted in regards to my career, like some of those bigger, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to say superficial, but some of the things that you're like, oh, these are the things that you should know. You know what
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean?
Right.
Whatever. But
Right.
when it came to like, what do you need?
Mm.
Right. That was really hard for me to answer. And
Yep.
I think about like my early development of, being an immigrant, like so
Mhm.
immigrating from Malaysia to
Mhm.
Canada, right? To Calgary,
Mhm.
Alberta at that.
'Cause they're
And
so similar.
there's so I found out, Dana, I found out just recently in this last year actually that because I always wondered why we ended up in Calgary
Oh, yeah.
as a Malaysian family, and it's because we couldn't get into New York.
Wow.
So we end up in Calgary, which is, just ethnically and racially really interesting
Yeah,
makeup,
yeah,
especially,
yeah.
for over 40 years ago. Um, and
Mm.
I distinctly remember my family not teaching me our native language because they didn't want me to
Mm.
have any
Yeah,
accent. They wanted me to have very good English.
yeah,
And they really squashed.
yeah, yeah.
And it was such an interest, like that's such an interesting experience for me. The only
Mhm,
thing I have
mhm.
really left is food.
Yeah,
The
I mean, we
food we
talk
make at
about
home.
in the United States, it's called the melting pot, and it
Yeah.
really is the melting pot because they're not just mixing things together like a salad, they're changing it chemically, which they really want is for you to be homogenous. I mean, and
Yeah.
that's I imagine Canada
Assimilation.
similar. Yeah, assimilation.
Yeah.
It's that same idea, and
Yeah.
then you lose all of what your roots are and what's important to your culture and everything else. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, and I think about, and just culturally, as a kid, it was like you
Hmm.
don't have any say.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
you don't
yeah.
have a
Yeah.
say as a child, and so
Yep.
I just didn't practice this. Like
Yeah.
I didn't practice having a voice,
Right.
and so
Yeah.
this is like so interesting. I think it as I try to relate and understand my clients and where they're coming from in
Hmm.
regards to feeling different, growing up, and what that feels like. It's probably the
Yeah.
closest thing that I
Yeah.
I
All
might
those
have.
layers. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So we're once again
Yeah.
sort of saying what you do to cope is normal, but it gets pathologized by the other, right?
Yeah.
We keep coming up against that too, because the dominant culture isn't interested in learning what's really going on with us to make us tick. It's more interested in putting us in a nice, neat little box and saying you fit in here, i.e., assimilating. Don't have an accent, learn how to speak English well, and so on. there's so much of that pressure to do those kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I understand what my parents were going for. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
think,
Oh,
I can
especially 40 years
understand,
ago. Yeah. Yep.
right? It's just success, right?
Yep.
It's just like, we just want you
Yep.
to be okay and be
Yep.
successful. And this is the path, right?
Yep.
And so that, I think that's just really fascinating. Like, it's a fascinating thing. And so, decision making isn't just logical.
Yeah.
I think is another way
Emotional.
that we're saying this,
Yeah.
and you don't logic your way out of or in and out of emotions. You
No.
don't.
No.
They have to work together. And we're not saying that, you just are a slave to your emotions either. I don't think Dana and I
Right.
are saying that.
Right.
But it is that DBT wise mind, that mix of your logical and your emotional mind and how they come
Yeah.
to how they overlap, kind of in a Venn diagram, and
Yeah.
how we're informed by both.
Yeah. And that's what I was taught and sort of learned early was think your way through everything. And
Yeah,
it took
me
me a
too.
really long time to get back the emotional component because it was just buried too deep, right?
Yeah.
I had to have a lot of therapy to get access to that again.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of therapy as well, which I think, Dana, as psychologists, is a necessary experience for
Mm-hmm.
us to have. We need
Yeah.
to be clients.
Yeah.
And
So
understand how it feels to be on the other side of the chair.
if someone has a low license number
Yeah.
and they've never been in therapy, run away. Yeah, I don't know how people
Run
can
for
be
the hills.
psychologists
The
and having
the
never done something.
hills are alive.
You can't you can't be a therapist and never ever have been in therapy. We're not saying you have to be in it for 20 years, but you have to have
No.
been on the other side of it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a thing. It's a thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so for those of you that feel like you have decision paralysis, or even we'll call it decision fatigue. So those are
Yeah.
two
Yeah.
different kinds of
Yeah.
concepts, but be compassionate with yourself. It's like, why is this decision hard for me, and how do I put myself in a position to make the best decision for myself at the time?
Okay.
There are lots of factors that lead to that. I know I never make a decision late at night. I'm really tired
Mhm.
and I'm cranky, and I just don't have all my cognitive faculties.
Yeah. So you learned that about
So
yourself. Yeah.
I did, yeah, and I learned that the hard way, to be
Yeah.
quite honest. And I get impulsive when I'm in those positions.
Yeah.
So but just
So
know how you make decisions the best.
stay
Oh
off
yeah.
of Amazon late at night.
That's probably why that home shopping network is running through the evenings like
I
that.
bet they're taking advantage of that. Yeah, totally. Makes sense to me. Oh, that's funny.
Wow. On that
Yeah.
note.
Yeah,
And
let's
on that
leave
note.
you with that mic drop.
Sorry.
We're going to start laughing and we're going to end laughing. Because
What
we're
else is
punchy.
new?
Yeah. True.
All right, Marvels. We'll see you in the next episode.
Bye,
Man.
everybody.